Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Susan Antman, and I am the Executive Director of the Jewish Federation in the heart of New Jersey. We join all people of good conscience in condemning the brutal killing of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer while 3 others stood by. We are outraged that yet another Black life has been lost to systematic American racism. The Jewish people are not bystanders. Our organizations and our community are called to solidarity with people of color in this moment. We value our long-standing mutual friendship and alliance with the African American community. We are committed to dismantling institutionalized racism in America, and we are committed to making our own institutions better able to bring justice to all marginalized people. Each of us must dig deep into our own biases and overturn stereotypes. The road to justice begins in our own backyards. We are each responsible for nurturing children, schools, and local communities that treat and see every individual as valuable, deserving of the same civil rights and human rights created by God in God's image. Pursuing racial justice is a human and a moral duty and a reflection of sacred Jewish values. We cannot judge the depth of pain giving rise to the violence and destruction that has accompanied some of the recent protests, but we cannot abandon the premise that the laws of this land must exist to serve and protect us all. My hope would be, instead of chaos, accountability. Let us hold the system whose biases result in the miscarriage of justice accountable to all whom it is designed to serve, and accountable to the basic premise that all men are created equal. We invite this community to come together and work together with each other, with our elected leaders, civic leaders, faith leaders, and with the good and decent law enforcement professionals who care for the well-being of the communities they serve and protect. Let us dismantle systematic racism and all bias together. Let us breathe new life into this conversation, knowing that words alone cannot fix racial inequality, nor anti-Semitism for that matter, nor bias towards any minority, from Islamophobia to LGBTQ bashing and beyond. But words can make us see that we are not alone in our pain or aspirations. Words can lead to action, and let our words sow the seeds of change. And finally, we express our deepest condolences to family and community of George Floyd. Indeed, we are all his community, and we share a Jewish traditional mourning sentiment in asking that his memory be a blessing to those who loved and knew him, indeed for us all. I thank you. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Eli Garfinkel, the spiritual leader of Temple Bethel of Somerset.
Good afternoon. The events of the past week have been a terrifying wake-up call for millions upon millions of white Americans. We are spiritually deaf. How sad it is that our cities must burn for us to look up from our iPhones just long enough to hear the sadness and deserved rage of our African American brothers and sisters. Speaking only for myself, but I hope for many others, I understand the concept of white privilege much more clearly than I did last week. White privilege means that nobody dares question the concept that my life matters. White privilege means that if I'm ever pulled over by the police for speeding, I'm afraid of what my wife will say. I'm not afraid of what the police might do if things go wrong. White privilege means that I am invisible when I want to be, that I can pass when I do not want to be seen, and I can be visible when I want to be noticed. White privilege means that if I am ever turned down for a job in the future, I am 100% sure that race will not be the reason. White privilege means that if my kid gets into Harvard, nobody will sneer and say it was affirmative action. White privilege means that when I see American institutions, I feel nothing but pride when there is much about which we should be ashamed. White privilege means that I didn't have to work hard to get an excellent education. It was practically served to me on a silver platter. I wasn't born on third base, but I was definitely born on first, maybe even second. Let me conclude by saying, we hear you, Black America. Tell us what to do, and also tell us what not to do. Tell us what to say, and tell us what not to say, so that the evil hands of racism will let your people go.
Thank you, Eli. I'm Rabbi Mark Klein. I am the Interreligious Chair of the Federation, and I serve Monmouth Reform Temple. We've come together tonight to try to begin a conversation that I hope will change this community and ultimately change the world. Three of my dear friends are with us tonight. We have done a lot of great work together. They have taught me, they have led me, and we shared a very challenging conversation yesterday with community officials, which really prompted the scream that we have to do something. And so I'd like to introduce them as they speak. So from the pastor of Second Baptist Church in Asbury Park, Samaj Van Zandt. Please, friend. Unmute him, Dan.
He's unmuted.
Good evening, everyone. This is, thank you so very much for this opportunity, and it's a pleasure to meet you all virtually, and hopefully one day those who I have yet to meet, I can meet physically. I'm grateful for this opportunity really to voice and for you to hear that as I watch the news, as I read the newspapers, as I see my news feed on social media platforms, that that the emotions that come about of frustration, the emotions that, or the thought that comes to my mind, it's constantly that this is not okay. I am, and I want you to know that I speak for me, and I'm sure a large majority of Black males and also other Black males that I'm not okay when I see this notorious thought or philosophy of white privilege being enacted yet again. I'm not okay, and I'm also concerned, right? Because to this week or last week rather, it was George Floyd. The week before that, it was Ahmaud Arbery. Week before that, Breonna Taylor and Tatiana Jefferson and Sandra Bland, and the list goes on and on and on. And I'm concerned because at any given moment, for any white rogue person wearing a police uniform, my name could become a hashtag. It can go from being Dr. Samaj Van Zandt, pastor of Second Baptist Church, to hashtag say his name. And not just for me, but for the two young boys whose skin has been beautifully kissed by the sun. As a father, I am concerned. As a Black man, I am not okay. It is, as Rabbi Klein mentioned yesterday, I'll restate what I told the law enforcement officials yesterday, that the typical answers are no longer acceptable. They're no longer acceptable of that policemen can exercise power and authority over Black men, and that the perception is always one of danger when Black skin is seen. That it is not okay for trained professionals to be so shallow. It's not okay that there's this disparity of two justice systems one in which Black and brown people are penalized at rates far higher than those who lack melanin in their skin. My wife is reading a book entitled We Want to Do More Than Survive by Bettina Love. And in that book, the author talks about white rage and how white rage is defined by and sparked by by the desire of Black people to advance. Something has to be done about that. It must be that, as Rabbi Garfinkel just mentioned, right, that all people get access immediately just by human right and nature to a solid education, that rights are not earned, but that they are just simply rights as being human beings in what we want to call and what I want to believe is the greatest country in the world. One thing I want to emphasize is that from your Black brother to my white brothers and sisters, we need you to speak up, not just in public, but in private. We need you to correct your friends and family. We need you to tell people that their language is wrong, that their prejudice is apparent. We need you to let them know that microaggressions are not okay. We need you to speak up, not just verbally, but also as you vote with us, stand with us, speak up for us, and we'll see that a change will come. You know, we all, though I am a Protestant, we all share the Old Testament and the Pentateuch. And in Genesis, first chapter, the 27th verse, we see there that when God created, that there was no distinction between the inherent value of one race or ethnicity over another. But God said that we're all created in God's image. And so I believe that in the same way you bear the imago Dei, the image of God, so do I, so do all Black and brown men and women, boys and girls. And we together have to become one to say we're going to fight. We're going to stand up with each other, vote with each other. We're going to declare and demand that everybody is seen as a child of God. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, Smash. I'd like to ask Reverend Kerwin Webb, who is the youth pastor at Second Baptist in Asbury, the president of Red Bank's NAACP, and the chairman of an effort we're working on to put up an appropriate monument for a lynching that happened in 1886 in Eatontown. So with that, Kerwin.
Thank you, Rabbi Klein. Thank you for the invitation and for all of you who are here. As the president of the Red Bank NAACP, I find myself at an interesting place. There are many intersectionalities with which I can speak to this issue or from this issue. I can speak as that of a theologian who was trained in religious history and world history. I can speak as a business major who can see the economic destruction and exploitation of Black people. I can speak as one who grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, whose mom and aunts and grandparents lived the civil rights movement and the struggle on the streets of Birmingham. And I find myself at this interesting place because, like Mark said, we are part of a coalition to bring awareness to racial injustice and lynchings and race terror in the North. And these days we find ourselves with hashtags and with marches and with protests about an issue that is as old as this nation. And so over the last few days, I've been challenged with what to say. What do we say about a problem that everybody knows about? What do we do about something that we cannot seem to get right? Where do we start? And so in my various conversations, I've had tremendous friends and colleagues in different organizations and places that have reached out to say, Kerwin, how are you doing? We know that you are involved. We know that you are engaged. And I think the thing that haunts me the most is my role as youth and young adult pastor at Second Baptist Church. Because in that role, my life, my work, my calling is to minister to God's children, God's beautiful children who just happen to be Black and brown. But also I think about my 3 nephews, 2 of them who are teenagers and 1 who is a preteen. And my nephews who are teenagers, they're taller than me and they look more mature than they actually are. These innocent babies, these children who will be looked at as threats by people who are sworn to protect and serve. The dangers aren't new. The conversations that we have with our families aren't new. Hopefully what is new now, though, is that the millions who've been on the sidelines pretending that this will somehow go away. The millions who Dr. Martin Luther King, when he was sitting in the Birmingham jail and wrote his letter to the moderate white religious leaders who were condemning the protest and condemning the fact that people were arguing and pushing for equality. And in one poignant line, King responds, I wish that you were just that upset about the conditions that brought these protests into being. So here's what I will say. I will say in this moment, with the political dynamic that we have going on and everything that we're going on in the country, let us not get distracted by the talk of protests. Let us not get distracted by the talk of violence or buildings being bombed or destroyed. Let's look at the reason that that's happening. Because if people didn't allow injustice to happen, people would not have to be in the streets. That's number one. Number two, I take a logical approach to all of this. If we know that for years the Black community has been exploited and used and divested in, then we and the people who are conscious, who have means, who have ability, it is time that we come together to really invest in the future of this country, in the future of our communities, in education, in business development, in networking, in these skills that we don't have because we were prohibited from gaining them. After that's done and we start building our own communities, we need your help to protect our communities. Because if you think about places like Tulsa, Oklahoma, you think about places like Rosewood, Florida, where Black people were doing what white people said. You know, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, build your own, be self-sufficient. Terrorism came and destroyed our buildings. So once we start building, once you help us, once you invest in us and we join arm in arm, hand in hand, and we build, help us protect it. But thirdly and most importantly, do not ever let those who want to divide us divide us. There are those who are going amongst the peaceful protesters that are causing destruction and leaving so that people will condemn the work that is being done. I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm hurt, I'm sad. But there's a part of me that's encouraged because something is different now. And that something, I hope, is that we will not be the only ones who have to carry this banner or push this message forward. That when we get tired, that when we run out of resources, that you will step to our side and help us go further. And that we will call out injustice wherever it may lie, in whatever colors it's wrapped in, no matter what office, no matter what state, no matter what benefit that we have to give up to do that. As a Christian, we are all created in God's image. And I do not try to prescribe my beliefs on anybody else, but what I do believe is that the God of creation is a God of unity and diversity and wants us to be together more than he wants us to be apart. And so it is our job, our task, and our responsibility to meet this moment as faith leaders, as people who see wrong and want to call it out, but also as humans, because we are all human before we're anything else. Thank you for this time. I look forward to working with you in the future.
Amen. Thank you, Kerwin. Pastor Ronald Sparks serves at Bethel AME in Freehold, and also a very dear friend who works closely with the prosecutor's office as well, and many of us. And so Ron?
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for inviting me as well. I want to thank Kerwin and Samaj for those wonderful messages. The question has come to me this week by several people asking me how I feel. As Kerwin said, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I'm numb. We see this all the time and it seems like it never changes. I think the difference in this time is when those things happened before, my oldest son was not really in tune with what was really happening. Even though he knew what was happening, it did not impact him until he sees this from the eyes of a husband and a father. No matter how much we tried to tell him what to do when he got stopped by the police officer, how to comply and make it to another day, now as a father, he's scared. He wants to be able to come home to his family. My youngest son, who's 13, is wondering what he must do, and is he one day going to be hurt just because of the color of his skin? So all those feelings, our emotions come to mind. But I remember an old movie called A Time to Kill, when Samuel Jackson was on trial for murder, and he had killed these white men for raping his daughter. And Matthew McConaughey was his lawyer. And in his closing statement, he told them a story, and he told them to close their eyes. And he described how Samuel Jackson's daughter was raped and the details. And he said, what if she was white? And what that did was it opened their eyes to see that she was a human little girl who was raped. I want you to do the same as we look at the ones, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Tamar Rice, and so many others that have been killed. What if they were white? They wouldn't be in the position in the first place. And so therefore there would be no story to tell. And so Rabbi Garfinkel asked, what can we do? We need your voice. We need your privilege to walk with us and work with us, because this is not going to change unless we have those who are not brown and black to walk with us and talk with us, not just to have conversation, but in those difficult times when we need people to speak up. When Moses got tired, he had people who raised his arms and kept him going. And that's what we need from the community all around us, is to help us, to walk with us, to raise our arms so that we don't get tired. The challenge is changing the inherent bias. We were on a call with the prosecutor yesterday, and based on that call, the reality is that, yes, they may get training, but that training doesn't help my son if he gets pulled over just because he's color of his skin, where 2, 3, and 4 cars will show up just because they're curious or they happen to see what's going on. When if it's a white person behind the wheel, you will get 1 car, and usually that's it. And so we have to work with the prosecution office, the police department, to develop relationships, and not just to talk, but to come up with ideas, concrete ideas and goals and objectives to actually allow us to move forward. And so we're going to need your help, because there are places that we're not going to be able to go by ourselves. There's some people that we're not going to be able to talk to by ourselves. And we're going to need you to help us to get in places we normally cannot go, that your voice would be our voice, so that when it is time to meet those that don't want to meet with us, we have you there, not just talking, but showing action. And so it is my prayer as a pastor, as a husband, as a father, as a man that's black, that we can not just have conversation, but we have to put concrete steps into place so that we don't continue to see this over and over again. And so I thank you for the invitation again. I look forward to working with all of you, and I pray that we can be one community rather than separate silos of Jewish, of Protestant, of African American, that we will be people of God to do what is right and to walk humbly before our God. Thank you.
Amen and amen. Ron, Kerwin, Samash, thank you. Susan, thank you. I can't apologize and won't apologize for being white. I had no control over this. I have absolute control over what I do with being white. But you know, as Jews, we're not really white. When I moved up here 6 years ago from Kentucky, one of the last people I met for the first time, right before I moved, said, "Wait, I thought you were white. You're Jewish?" You know, we've become very comfortable in white America. And we're seeing a rise in anti-Semitism, and we should understand that we may look white, but we're still the other. This is why there's always been a symbiosis between Jews and Black America through the Civil Rights Movement. This is why Joachim Prince and Abraham Joshua Heschel marched with Dr. King and Ralph Abernathy. And this is why the Civil Rights Acts were signed in the Religious Action Center of Reformed Judaism. It's a shared history, and what happens to one of us happens to all of us. And when Greg Floyd was murdered, it wasn't a Black man that was murdered, it was a human being that was murdered. And that knee of that officer was on my throat no differently than his. And if we don't see it that way, if we're not willing to understand that it was our throats on the line, then we can never find each other in God. Ron said that Moses' arms were up and he got help. Well, it's time that we are the Joshua and the Caleb to Moses. Moses was on top of a mountain, we were battling, and every time his arms were raised, we were winning the war. When his arms got tired, we lost. Well, it's our turn. It's our turn to be Joshua and Caleb to the Moses that will stand firm for what's right in this world, what should be right in this world. Torah was given in the wilderness. Torah was not given to a people. Our tradition, the rabbis from 2,200 years ago taught that the Torah was given in the wilderness so that it is the possession of everybody's. Israel can't say it's just ours. No one can say it's just ours. We share it. And ultimately, Torah is this gift of wisdom, of enlightenment, a pathway to justice, a pathway to righteousness. And the Jewish understanding of the Messianic age is about world peace. We all have to be able to sit under our vines and our fig trees unafraid with each other. That's what's sacred about our call to justice. This isn't a political platform. This isn't a matter of partisanship. You can't walk into a house of worship in any of our traditions and pray the liturgy of peace, of justice, and then walk outside and let things be as they are. Prayer is a call to action. We don't show up in church or synagogue to be comforted. We show up to remind ourselves and be reminded that serving God requires us to step outside of our comfort zones and to do the work of making it real. This month, in 1964, 17 Reform rabbis were arrested in St. Augustine for going down and marching with Dr. King. And the white community, including the Jewish community of Florida, chastised these rabbis for showing up. And their answer was, how can I pray to God and not stand up for my brother? Folks, the world has not changed a whole lot. We have a lot of work to do, and we've got to do it together. We have to remember that, going back to that Genesis text, we were all created in the divine image. It doesn't matter what color we are, it doesn't matter what gender. Please remember that Eve was drawn from Adam's body, which means we are all male and female. There is no such thing as different race or different creed. There is one God and there's one humanity. Am echad im lev echad, one people with one heart. And it won't be until we get back to that place where we can look in each other's eyes and see God staring back that we can look at a world and hopefully call it whole. Several years ago, shortly after I got here, Dr. Ali Chaudhry and several of us went to the State House in Trenton and brought with us the pledge to stand up for each other. That pledge that Dr. Chaudhry challenges communities not to be complacent, and you're about to get that screen. Ultimately, and I'm going to ask everyone privately to take this pledge in a moment, but it's real easy at a dinner party with family and an uncle starts speaking badly and you don't want to cause a problem at the dinner party and you say, oh, that was Uncle Joe and it's okay. But then Uncle Joe walks away saying nobody at the party challenged him when he spoke badly about people of different ethnicities. If we don't stand up against ourselves and help teach ourselves, then it can't go any further. So with that, the pledge is on the screen. Please recite it with me. While interacting with members of my own faith or ethnic or gender community, or with others, if I hear hateful comments from anyone about members of any other community, I pledge to stand up for the other and speak up to challenge bigotry in any form. This pledge becomes real when we do the work of walking together and being together. And we need to remember that this is wonderful that so many people are here for this event, but we have to stop showing up at events in each other's lives and start showing up in each other's lives. It's about breaking bread together. It's about praying together. It's about walking together. It's not about talking heads and then we go home feeling good. So to everyone who's here who had the trust to be here tonight, thank you so much. To Jewish Federation of the Heart in New Jersey, thank you for the partnership that I'm blessed to share in. And I have to give kudos to my congregation, Monmouth Reformed Temple, that lets me do this. I know Rabbi Garfinkel's congregation supports his work in the community. And let's make sure that we come back together soon. Susan?
I too want to thank you all for joining and thank you all for participating. And I look forward that this is not one time where we're together, but it's the beginning of building wonderful relationships and support of each other moving forward. I want everyone to be well, be safe, and take good care, and all the best to you and your families. And hope to see you again soon.
Amen. Thank you all. Be blessed.
Thank you.